Hello, and welcome to this conference breakout session entitled Inclusively Digitizing the Employee Experience. Today's presenters are Wendy Rentschler and Giselle Moda. Wendy is the head of Global Corporate Social Responsibility at BMC Software and is responsible for developing and implementing BMC Software's Global Corporate Citizenship, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion programs, BMC Cares, focused on philanthropy and volunteerism, and sustainability initiatives. Wendy has more than 15 years of experience as a human resources leader in healthcare and technology. With a deep focus on analytics and strategies to identify and disrupt bias in social systems and corporate culture, she uses data to demonstrate the value of DEI initiatives as not only the right thing to do, but as a business imperative of our time. Giselle is a forward-thinking strategist of innovative technology solutions focused on the future of work. Giselle currently serves as a principal consultant on the ADP Future of Work team. In this role, she assists executives and HR practitioners with innovative human capital management strategies amidst digital disruption, such as artificial intelligence, automation, analytics, the gig economy, and many other relevant trends. Throughout her career, Giselle has been a keynote speaker alongside transformation leaders from Google, Microsoft, IBM, Salesforce, Amazon, and LinkedIn, as well as many other organizations. She is an industry leader in bringing relevance, simplicity, and humanity to the future of work topics. And now, let's hear from Wendy and Giselle.
Hello, Giselle. How are you?
Doing well, super well, and I'm happy to be here with you today.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to be talking about inclusively digitizing the employee experience. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Giselle Moda. I'm a principal consultant for the future of work at ADP, where I talk a lot about how the world of work is changing, the trends, and a lot of kind of those digital technologies that we're going to talk about today.
Wonderful. And my name is Wendy Rentschler. I am the global head of corporate social responsibility at BMC Software, and I am thrilled to be here today to speak with you all, but very thrilled to speak with Giselle. Do you mind if I tell them how we met?
No, I don't mind. I was going to say, yes, I mind, but no, I don't mind.
It was a chance meeting and we had a slide about it. So we were going to talk about it. Giselle and I met actually at HR Technology Conference. I think it was 2018 or 2019. I don't remember the year, but we met over a conversation around algorithmic bias. So when we were talking about digitizing the employee experience, I knew that this would certainly be a foundational part of that conversation. And so was glad to share the journey of our friendship together. It was right after Gloat and Schneider Electric had done their white paper business case about internal mobility. And I was talking to a young entrepreneur named Steven Zhao about his technology, and overall talent acquisition at the time had a hot trend of organizations buying facial recognition software during the recruitment process, where it would read your emotions based on your facial inflections when you were answering questions. Now, I'm sure if you've come to any of these conferences by now, you know that that is riddled with bias, including code switching. A lot of people do code switch, and so it wouldn't pick up things like that. It was based on machine learning, based on already biased data. So as soon as I was talking about this, a wonderful person appeared from the crowd and said, I don't know you, but I need to be in this conversation. And that is how Giselle and I met. So we have been fast friends ever since, and both are activists in this work to make sure that we can create inclusive environments globally, and how HR tech can support you in that journey when mindfully and responsibly building your stacks or revisioning your stacks. So Giselle, tell us, what is algorithmic bias and computer vision and machine learning, and why are these things so important to take into consideration in the HR tech journey?
Algorithmic bias is, a lot of people say, oh, the AI is biased. It's not that AI is biased in and of itself. AI only works as good as the data that it's being trained on. So when we talk about the algorithms that make up and how an AI is processing information and coming up with conclusions and deciding, for example, if someone needs to be judged or sentenced in a court proceeding when you're using AI, or if somebody's credit score is at a certain level or not, if they have a credit risk, or if somebody's a good candidate or not, but depending on the information on their resume and their application. When we use artificial intelligence to make those decisions, the problem is, and even the opportunity with that exists, that the algorithms or the machine learning and the data that's being compiled through an algorithm to be able to come up with that conclusion, that output, sometimes the data is surfacing biases that humans have. So again, back to the credit risk example, if you're depending on a certain demographic information, economic information, somebody's race, their gender, et cetera, to make a decision on if they're a credit risk or not, many times the way that those data sets are compiled and the way that that information comes to be, it's using a set of people's information and data that tends to be a homogenous group of people. And it's typically, in all of these cases, typically a lot of the data is always typically your white male. And if that's the subset of what we're looking for as good, then a lot of other people get excluded, and they're at risk. There's risk then of bias. So that's algorithmic bias for a lot of different, there's so many different examples that we can give, but it's really checking to see what is that data, what are we training our algorithms with, what is the data, and is that data in and of itself surfacing any biases that we have as human beings.
Yeah, I always say like the machine learning is only as good as the data that you put in, and the algorithmic bias, the algorithms of our lives literally dictate our lives from what pops up on our Facebook and our Google ads. And it's all based on like this historical data. And sometimes it gets it right, but oftentimes it gets it wrong. I would recommend to anyone in the audience, before you really set out on this journey, watch Coded Bias. It's a documentary. It's on Netflix, and it goes into great detail about this. It's very fascinating and very interesting. And if you signed up for the session, you will love the documentary and become an activist yourself to make sure that you are inclusively creating spaces for people based on good data. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the opportunities that you have seen where you can create, where you can overcome algorithmic bias? Like, what have you seen in some of your engagements in the last year or two, where there was so much great intention, but then there were some pitfalls along the way because of the data?
I think that, like, working with ADP, which is a human capital management company, a lot of the ways in which we use AI is to surface insights around human capital management. So from somebody's, the time that they have a job application out there, from the time that they leave the organization. Now, some of the things that we've noticed over time, I'll give you one quick example. How do you consider the risk of somebody being like a flight risk or having a probability of turnover, right? We have to make sure that we're not accounting for things like someone's gender, anything that can really kind of exclude a person. And in times when we have noticed that there may be any bias, we actually have an AI ethics board that sorts through everything that we're doing. Who has the data governance? Who's in charge of this? How are they using the data? Is the algorithm biased or not? So we're checking into that and looking at that always. So I can't give you just one specific case because we're just constantly searching for that in our work.
Do you know what I found so fascinating? That is, I think, like the number one story around the cautionary tale of HR technology and algorithmic bias. It's the Amazon example,
Oh,
where
yes.
Amazon has tried for years and years to create, you can imagine they get inundated with resumes and applications. And when I used to lead talent acquisition, of course, you get leaders in your organization. I just saw this on LinkedIn or in an article, algorithm, like this AI is going to cure all of our, recruitment challenges. And that example of Amazon and their inability with all of the organizational cash flow that they have to be able to build a tool that was not biased to screen resumes is just so fascinating
Mhm.
and really speaks to why it's so important to make sure that you are being quite intentional when you start to go through the RFP process with the products that you're interested in. Don't always be, like some of them are snake oil for sure. But some of them really do have, like some applicable opportunities to cast that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens and help you become more inclusive as an organization. And we all know that digitizing this is wildly important. But I think just to always keep in mind that it's technology and it was built by humans. So it's going to have flaws and to
Right.
not blindly, lead yourself into it, right?
Yeah, and I talked about that AI ethics board, and the key to that is like, because I loved what you just said, like a tip for people as well. Another tip is vet everything, vet your vendors, but make sure you have a group of people, even if it's internally, that can be in charge of understanding, like, wait, before we go to market with this solution that we're making, if it's using AI, if it's using anything at all, or before we go with a vendor, let's vet all of this and let's find, with a fine tooth comb, let's sort through this and understand where there may be bias. So I would say inject diverse perspectives is my tip for the audience as well. So if you look around your decision makers in your organization, and who's deciding on the technology that you're buying, who's deciding on what you're implementing, who's making those decisions at the end of the day? Because if it's not a diverse group of people, again, you're going to have a homogenous group of minds seeing and thinking the same way. You should probably even consider, I know a lot of times we don't have someone with a disability, that, even in our groups, we're not considering those kind of things as an example, but have them. So when I say diverse, it's not just gender, it's not just race and ethnicity, it's all kinds of different perspectives,
But
to help you.
yeah. And I would say too, like, that's an incredible tip. And one of the things that we do is we use our employee resource groups as testing grounds for almost everything from launching apps. What do you think about this benefit? We're in the middle of a web accessibility project, as you mentioned. Like, do you think that this is something that would be beneficial to you? Would it be beneficial to you? A lot of accessibility technology too has plugins for, like, I know that I have ADHD and it has opportunities for not only, there's the neurodivergent capacity as well. And I think that's like really important to bring into the spectrum as you, to your point, like assess all of these tools. Um, I think one of the things too that we were going to talk about, and I'm going to go back to that slide, was why is this important? Like, why has this become like this issue? You and I certainly talk about the ROI of corporate social responsibility and diversity, equity, inclusion, but I'd love to hear your take. And then, I'll be sharing mine as well.
Yeah, for sure. So apart from that monetary side, where obviously there's been research and studies, and people who have more diverse, equitable, and inclusive cultures and environments at work, they perform better with revenue at the bottom line. However, it also spurs innovation. It's also going to create a culture and employer branding where people want to come work for you and stay working for you. So people now care. And if you start looking at these headlines that are on the screen, it's different reasons why people are caring. It's different triggers. So we have, for example, the SEC, the US Security Exchange Commission, put out that HCM metrics need to be accounted for and be investigated, publicized, et cetera, for public facing companies. So with that being said, a lot of organizations now who never used to kind of uphold diversity in their metrics, now they're paying attention to it because the SEC is requiring it. And then you have all these other ones as well. We've seen organizations that never had a diversity officer or a diversity office all of a sudden start to build that. And again, it's for all these reasons. And the push was all of the events that happened globally in 2020, with racial injustice, but also the pandemic surfaced systemic disparities and issues that exist among all types of people, so people are paying attention now.
Yeah, and I think even before 2020, the CEO of Black Knight had penned an article to all of the CEOs involved in that consortium saying the future of investing, ESG or environmental societal governance and risk rating will be a part of that. And one of those reasons is because millennials and Gen Z are the buying center and the lion's share of these products now.
Right.
They are the decision makers. Study after study show that they only want to do work, spend money with organizations that are demonstrating this historically current state and future state and have a strategy. And almost overnight, like ESG has become kind of like the karma credit score for organizations. I mean, as an organization, if you don't have a good ESG score, it dictates what your share price is going to be at IPO. It dictates if you want to take a large investment out, what your percentage rate is. And so that, along with the buying center, the talent workforce, I think in the last 6 days, how many articles have we seen where 4 million people just left their jobs in April because
Right.
they don't want to return to the office, So that's why it's so important. And I think a great segue to lead into why you have to inclusively digitize this employee experience, because people are on the go now. I know I have a very active life. I have a lot of little people that rely on me, and I work really weird hours, but they work well for me. And almost every person in the workforce wants that now, and they've had a taste of it, and they've had the opportunity to actually enjoy their life. I read a couple of articles of people just sharing those journeys. And so how are you as an employer going to ensure that you're keeping them engaged, helping them upskill, doing it objectively, doing it inclusively? And so I think I know now Giselle and I will kind of talk about that, but I first, because we're at a total rewards conference, want to ask everyone in the audience probably wants to hear all about the data analytics, because that's probably the most data analytics and total rewards. So can you tell us a little bit about what ADP is doing? I've seen the tool in action, but it's been a minute, and I know that it's a very robust reporting tool that you've got going on there.
Mm-hmm. So our data science team is always flexing and coming up with ways in which we can use the troves of data that we have at ADP on people's information through payroll. You can imagine how much information and data that we have, because we pay like 1 in 6 Americans, and then we have global accounts as well. So when we think about HCM data, we have typically, done the turnover predictions, the benchmarking of annual compensation, exploring, understanding what do salaries look like. We're able to give real income information based on demographics. So sometimes we have marketers and people who are trying to understand, where do I open up my next business? Who lives in this area? We have all that demographic information, the pay information, the economic information on so many people that it surfaces a lot of insights. So specific to what we're talking about today, one of the things that we've done is ensure that we create some visibility into diversity gaps, equity gaps, and inclusion gaps. So what we have, one of the newest things, and I was a part of this team, was creating this, what's called the diversity dashboard. And what it does is it goes from the employee entire life cycle, from hire to retire, and it's able to surface data insights, the gaps that may exist. So what does your recruiting and hiring pipeline look like? You started off with X percentage of different ethnicities and races applying to a role, but by the time you close that role, maybe there's a significant gap, and you went right again to maybe old ways and you hired the same group of people. Why? And so we're surfacing things like that as far as leadership. How many people are sitting in leadership roles that are diverse? What is your pay looking like as far as pay equity, and where are your gaps? And then so we're surfacing again all of these insights in a dashboard approach. A lot of our insights are also delivered just with our data analytics tool through mobile insights. So many times somebody will just get a push notification sent to their phone through AI. We have storyboards, which means your data is being told to you in a more conversational way. So you don't have to sit there and look at a bunch of reports, dashboards, because your eyes start crossing when you're looking at graphs sometimes, but it'll just say in plain English, or or plain whatever the language you might be using the tool is, hey, did you realize that this person is a top performer and they're at risk of leaving the organization because, and you can drill down and then start to see, you haven't promoted them in a while, you haven't considered their compensation in a while as well. So there's many different ways where basically we're taking data insights and making it easy to consume so that the right people can see it and make the right decisions when they need to. And a lot of times it is based now on diversity, equity, inclusion as well.
I love those actionable insights. And I think one of the most fascinating things to me was, as someone who's worked in benefits technology before, and like it's annual compensation survey, annual, benefits, annual enrollment. This is all live. Like, so it's live data, which I thought was so fascinating because, as we all know, right now, the world is changing so fast. Like that compensation survey you participated in last year is probably not relevant
Right.
anymore. So I absolutely loved seeing that, and real live data, actionable insights. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Another question I had was, you had mentioned something before around like VR and AR. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how that can be applied in this like digitizing of inclusive employee experience.
Yeah, I think that first of all, AR and VR, not only is it cool to use, but I think what it does is it creates an opportunity for people who may not have had access to you physically. Maybe they're in a different location, but now they can experience your organization, they can experience your culture, your training, your learning and development in immersive ways. And I know that during the pandemic, like even I got my VR goggles. I attended like comedy clubs. I checked out concerts. I was informed with educational experiences. Like there's actually one environment in VR where you get to put your goggles on. You're in the vehicle of a police, or excuse me, you're in a vehicle where there's minorities, especially a group of Black young kids who are driving in a scenario, and they get pulled over by the police. And as a person who you may not have that experience, you now get to see yourself in the passenger seat or in the back of the car or driving, and what it feels like for a police officer to come up on, in the car, hearing the instructions that are being told to you at the moment, being asked to get out. It was just such an immersive and eye-opening experience for me that I think, police divisions and forces are also using it as a training immersive experience. But if you think about the workplace, there's one tool that is teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically one that I tested out as well, where you're able to put yourself in the body, if you would, or simulated experience of someone who's not like you. So you put these goggles on, you look in this virtual reality mirror, and it reflects to you the hands, the face, the voice, everything, the skin of someone of a different race, of a different gender, of a different sexual identity, and you're able to hear dialogue on how it is in that person's lived experience to hear when somebody says, "Oh, can I touch your hair? It looks so great." You're like, you're, no, you cannot, ladies and gentlemen. No, that's not. Don't do it. And
Don't
so
touch people's hair. Like, we all have a bubble. We exist in it. So please.
there's
Well,
that.
I love that you were talking about that. So I know, like, leading diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, one of the biggest things that I'm always striving for is to build like this interpersonal awareness, but also gaining empathy through recognizing other people's lived experiences. So we
Right.
do the diversity speaker series where people are hearing from someone like they can actually like IM or reach out to, that maybe they didn't have in like their spheres before. And I think that has been incredibly helpful. But when you talk about like virtual reality and the ability to transport yourself into someone else and live in their experience, what an incredible way to build empathy and just become stronger in your awareness, a better ally, a better advocate. One of the things that we've used for, we intertwine a lot of our diversity, equity, and inclusion with our philanthropic work. And we just recently bought VR headsets for the National Health Service Hospital in the UK for their first care responders, all of their doctors, nurses, and clinicians, for a wellness room. So like we got this wellness room within the hospital and decked it out with all of this virtual reality, where so that way they can just put it on after like the trauma and PTSD of dealing with COVID patients, and then just it's a lot, and be able to be at the beach for a minute or be able to just relax. And so there are so many applicable use cases that you can use, from like employee wellness to diversity, equity, and inclusion to even onboarding. As we live in this more remote environment, I've actually never been to the BMC offices ever, because I started with them during the pandemic. So it would have been cool, like it would be cool
Yeah.
to like have virtual reality and like I know when I talk to some of my colleagues when they're doing like some people in spaces work within our real estate, I'll be like, "Ooh, let me see over there. What does it look like over there?" So again, like so many opportunities to use virtual reality in that way. Another thing I know we wanted to talk about was recruiting, because that's kind of like how we started, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And recruiting for me, especially leading talent acquisition, that is like where you start to build the pipeline of this, the pipeline that will end up being your employees that go through this life cycle or your succession plans. And it really all starts there. So, you know, feedback you get from hiring managers around like culture fit, I'm like, that's just an excuse to hide behind your discrimination because it's culture ad. No more culture fit people. All right. Culture ad. We want to add people to the conversation to create innovation and inclusive workplaces. But one of the tools that I absolutely love in the recruitment talent acquisition experience is career.place. And it's a software that anonymizes the profile of the candidate during the hiring journey. And it's such a great aid too, because at the end, by the time if you're a hiring manager can have like dialogue with the candidate, but only around like their knowledge, skills, and abilities, which we'll talk about in a minute, because that's how you should be hiring people.
Yes.
But at the end, if there's this space where all of a sudden you unlock the person's identity and they don't want to move forward with that candidate anymore, that's a coaching opportunity, that's a leadership opportunity, but that's an opportunity to understand where these blind spots are coming from and maybe why you have representation issues. So that is one of my favorites. What are one of your favorites? Have you seen any tools like this in recruitment in particular that you love?
Yeah, we actually, let's say one from ADP again. We use something that's candidate relevancy. So I'll throw a couple things out. So with that tool, we help to use AI to understand what are the skills that someone is bringing with their resume, their application, or even kind of what they manually entered. And then what it does is apply AI to match the person. So it'll say, okay, this is a role and this is how this person matches. And maybe they're a high, medium, or low match. But what I like about it, because there's other tools like that exist, is we make sure that we're not eliminating anybody from the runnings based on, let's say, education. Like, so the AI is learning to not match based on discriminatory type of things. So no education, gender, whatever. So we're trying to kind of avoid that whole Amazon situation that you talked about earlier by making sure that we're mitigating any biases. The other is chatbots. So in the recruiting process, a lot of times some people will be dissuaded. They don't want to really kind of go through the process because they feel like they maybe don't understand what the role is, or they think that they're not a good fit for it for some reason. So instead of having a human recruiter, screen these candidates, we do create an opportunity for the chatbot to pre-screen the candidate. And then, of course, is being used with AI and to engage with the candidate as they're hiring and applying. So it'll walk them through what is the job about, answer questions for them, and if they need to, it'll connect them to a human. So, those are different ways that we help out with recruiting and using AI. But the cool thing about it to me is it doesn't eliminate the human's final decision. It gives you insights, and you as a human make that decision. Is that person really a low ranking person, and why? Because maybe I want that person, even though the AI said that it may be low ranking, but I can at least see the results. And I didn't do the sorting and the thinking, but at least I can go see the results and make a final decision on my own.
Yeah. And I love that too, because again, it's like a good coaching opportunity. It's a good opportunity to understand, okay, well, maybe if I like this type of candidate and they're working out really well a year from now, maybe the job profile is not what we're, pushing it out to be.
Sure.
One of my favorite things that I think I've ever done in talent acquisition is move to this skills-based way of hiring. And this works really well when it's roles that you're hiring a lot of people into, and it's really, like very hard skills, communication, typing, spelling, and grammar, VLOOKUPs, pivot tables, relational database work. And at my previous employer, we used this software called eSkill. And once we understood like what the actual functional skills were for roles, we were able to, no matter who applied, because a lot of times, people don't get the opportunity or access to build out a resume, so we were trying to, fill the void of lack of access and opportunity that people don't get, right? But a lot of people do micro learning on their own. A lot of people are like taking Python classes on Coursera and Udemy and Golang and on LinkedIn learning Golang. And so anyone that applied, we would send the assessment to, and if they applied and like they got a minimum score, we would get an alert and my team. And then we spoke to them about the role in more detail. We also made sure that they could do digital literacy. So a lot of our jobs were remote, and people would often come to me and be like, how do you know that I didn't take the assessment? And I was like, you could put video at beginning, middle, and end where it's like, show your ID, and they would show their ID and they get back to the assessment. So there were lots of really cool check and balances, but it was the most objective way to hire people. And the profile and the racial stratification that we had in some of our roles completely went away because we started to hire from this very objective place of, we know what the skills are for this role, and we are going to hire people based on those skills, not our guts, not our culture fits, but on actual skill. And it's a really incredible way to just start to build those pipelines of representation as well into those roles where you have like a large opportunity to do so. So
yeah, it also creates internal mobility. So to that point that we
yes.
have, so if you think about using that same logic that you just were talking about and saying, okay, here's the roles that we're probably like, we have project work, or we need something to get done, or here's a role that we were going to hire for. But start assessing the skills that you have internally, and understanding, even with AI can help to surface that, just to exactly what you just said. And you can probably, instead of hiring from outside, develop someone with adjacent skills from the inside. Right. And then that goes right back into learning and development as well. A skills-based approach to all of these things.
Yeah. And when you do the skills-based approach too, to your point, like you can crowdsource for projects, it creates a more objective performance time, one-on-one, continuous performance. Another recommendation for HR tech, one of my favorite platforms that does this is called Degreed. And Degreed brings in all of the skills from not only the person's social profile, but once the skills are on there, because someone could be like, I'm an expert at Excel. P.S. No one is. Okay, like not even the people that wrote Excel. But you can assess them on it. Like once someone has added that as a skill in their profile, in their like internal profile as an employee, now they're in the organization. They're now starting that employee experience during the onboarding process of filling out all of the skills that they have, and then testing themselves on it and seeing on the project job board what's available. Managers on the other end can be like, I need someone that can do Golang and has a project management certification. And all of these types of people start to pop up, and you can reach out to them. And I think that's a huge opportunity for a lot of large organizations, because oftentimes, sometimes they're doing a reduction in force or a furlough, but that's because they only knew of what the person does now. And I'm like, people do so many things.
Right.
I've taken almost every LinkedIn learning masterclass. Like people do that now. People love learning. So
people are learning, yes, adding to their skills. And again, in AI, for example, you can use, we talked about learning and development, so training people in their diversity gaps too, but you can also use, like a personalized coach. You talked earlier about kind of like
what I love Culture Pop. Culture Pop is my favorite app for that. So it's like a micro learning app called Culture Pop. But because I work in a global company, it was very hard to find tech that was global. A lot of it is very like US centric. And we have 6,000 employees in 38 countries. And I didn't want it. A lot of organizations hire diversity and equity leaders, but then they become exclusionary because they want to do their ERGs in geographic locations, or they want to, becomes like siloed geographically. And I'm like, no, we will all go to ERG meetings together. We will all learn about each other, and we will be one BMC. Nice. They get tired of me saying that, but no, they don't. They love it. But I love Culture Pop is awesome because also too, it's Colonel Greg Gatson is one of the co-founders. He's like this wildly influential diversity leader. They were just so thoughtful and intentional about it. And it's micro learning on the go, building awareness 4 minutes at a time. And it's not going to work for everyone. I think that when you're building out these stacks, you've got to be mindful of the different abilities, digital literacy, accessibility throughout your workforce, because not everyone might have a cell phone, or not everyone might, be like mobile adoptive as others. So making sure you have skills or programs around that to be more inclusive.
Yeah, you mentioned a good point too. I would say another quick tip for everyone is like ADP has a marketplace where we bring a lot of different partners. Like some of the things we build, some of the things we integrate with. Make sure that you look out for people who are creating tools by diverse people for diverse people as well. And I love that you just mentioned that was it
Yes.
culture?
Culture pop. And that was such a great piece of advice, because I can't tell you how many, as when you have that title of diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, I get like 5 emails a day about some tech that's going to change, that's
Yeah.
going to make everyone woke, and we're all going to be like inclusive social justice warriors tomorrow. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And oftentimes I am a curious person. I love an HR tech demo. I love HR technology. I'll start talking to them and they're like, yeah, we just, like we were an event planning app and now we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. No one is of any demographic or like outside of a dominant group. They've only been doing it for a year. And then they'll be like, how can we help you? And I'm like, there's literally nothing you can help me with.
You can't.
But be mindful, like look at the people that have made the app, to Sal's point. Who made the app? Who are their clients? And also too, I'll also say, don't reinvent the wheel. A lot of times you have incredible tech stacks. Call your client manager. If your client manager doesn't know, ask to speak to their boss. Maybe you already have functionality you pay for that you don't turn on. EAPs are like the most underutilized. Only 3 to 5% of people use their employee assistance program, and some of them have mobile apps now. You can also, side tip, call your EAP, ask them to give you like PDFs and marketing collateral around like BIPOC mental health resources, LGBTQ mental health resources. You want to make sure that any of these products that you use, you call your reps and ask them, what diversity, equity, and inclusion lenses do you have for these products that I can share with my employee population? Because I guarantee you, they all have them now. You just got to call and ask. And it's a great way to push it out to your population so that they can start to feel included on that journey.
Yeah. I think we're at time just about, so we're gonna wrap up in a little bit, right? So what do you think? What are your final thoughts? I'm gonna ask you, you've been asking me questions. What are your final thoughts?
Okay. My final thoughts, especially in benefits and total rewards. I know I shared some advice there, but 2020 has been a very traumatic year for a lot of people. And although like we're halfway into 2021, like it's still 2020, right? So please be mindful, give people space, give people options. And when it comes to like mental health, push your EAP program. I know you're probably so tired of doing that, but just push comms around the EAP program and like the benefits that people can have around that. Additionally, we didn't really talk about financial literacy tools, but those are so important. And as an employer, you should feel responsible in some capacity, especially if you're offering like 401ks or defined benefit, defined contribution, to make sure that you are helping people create generational wealth that might not have had those opportunities before. So again, if you're with Fidelity, I know they have a massive diversity, equity, and inclusion team, and they are doing everything to tell you about it and giving you all the products to make sure that you're bringing people to the table with financial literacy education, ESG funds that people can invest to around sustainability. So talk to your reps, find out what they have available, and start to build those into the tools that you have. And also, okay, one more, Syndio is another great tool as well around pay equity. I think ADP and Syndio do similar things, but these are, if you aren't in an ADP stack and you can't move, that's a great add-on as well for around pay equity and pay analysis to build out your strategy too. So I think that's all for now.
That's awesome.
What about you, real quick?
Yes, real quick. I'd say, just simply put, I would encourage everyone out there to put on your lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion through I want you to take a step back and say, and just start to consider, where are we perhaps excluding anybody from the experience, from the time that they were putting out a job requisition, from the time that somebody is moving in our organization, or even succession plans, or leaving the organization. how does this impact the different people that we're trying to attract and retain in our organization? And that might lead you to create a group. Like I talked about how ADP has an ethics group and a governance group. Maybe you create one, and maybe you bring in external advisors to help you with that. Or maybe you really start vetting the technologies that you're working with. But it's just applying that lens. Maybe it is like Wendy mentioned earlier, applying more of your ERGs into your business so that you have diverse markets and not just, creating diversity solutions internally, but you're thinking about how that internal group impacts what you're doing as well. So yeah, just put on your lenses of diversity, equity, and inclusion in everything that you do. Yeah.
Awesome. Giselle, I'm so excited that we finally got to do this. This has been a dream in the making for me for a long time. So I'm so happy we finally got to do something like this together. And thank you all for coming to our talk. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to one another. Feel free to reach out to us on social media. We'll make sure that that is at the end of our session. We constantly are sharing, and Giselle speaks at so many wonderful conferences where you can continue to build your skills and knowledge and abilities. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us for this session. We would love to hear your thoughts on the conference, our presenters, and the session content. Please take a moment to complete your brief conference survey. Pre-approved recertification codes for HRCI and SHRM will be emailed to all attendees within 10 days of viewing the session. We thank you for your patience. Please now return to the conference agenda to select your next session. All conference video links will be activated approximately 1 minute before the session's start time on July 29th and will remain available through October 22nd, 2021 to allow all attendees maximum opportunities to view the content.